The story begins in the shadowed corners of the ancient world, where the ordinary and the terrifying existed side by side. Long before empires rose and fell, before kings and priests claimed dominion over life and death, there were those who walked in darkness, worshipping forces that most could not even name. Among these secretive sects, none was more feared or more misunderstood than the cult of the Black Sun. Its followers were drawn by promises of forbidden knowledge, unimaginable power, and the tantalizing illusion of immortality. Yet, their devotion came at a cost, a price measured not in gold or land, but in human lives, morality, and the very essence of the soul. The Black Sun was more than a symbol. It represented the shadow side of existence, the hidden fears and desires that ordinary men and women dared not confront in the daylight. While the sun above illuminated the world with warmth and life, its black counterpart cast a chilling reflection, a mirror to humanity's deepest obsessions and cruelties. Those who sought it believed that only by walking willingly into darkness could one grasp the ultimate truths of existence. The cult thrived in secrecy, operating in hidden sanctuaries and remote caves, often beneath the eyes of the very civilizations that claimed to dominate the ancient world. To outsiders, their ceremonies were incomprehensible, a mix of beauty and terror that blurred the line between devotion and madness. Participants moved with purpose through rituals designed to disorient, captivate, and control, combining hypnotic music, flickering firelight, and intoxicating scents that dissolved the boundaries of fear and ecstasy. Even more disturbing was the psychological mastery the cult wielded over its adherents. New initiates were not simply recruited, they were reshaped, stripped of identity, and bound by oaths that transcended morality. Every act, from the smallest gesture to the most extreme sacrifice, was meticulously orchestrated to produce a mixture of awe and dread. By the time the ceremony concluded, the initiate's mind had been rewired, loyalty to the Black Sun became indistinguishable from devotion to life itself. This was not blind fanaticism. It was a carefully constructed world where the forbidden became sacred, where horror was a path to enlightenment, and where ordinary humans discovered the terrifying power of submission and belief. As we peer into the shadows of history, we must confront the uneasy truth. The Black Sun cult was not simply a relic of ancient superstition. It was a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of the human psyche, a chilling reminder that fascination with power, mystery, and the forbidden is as old as civilization itself. The origins of the Black Sun cult are shrouded in mystery, buried beneath layers of myth, rumor, and fragmented archaeological traces. Scholars have long speculated that its roots stretch across continents, from the sun-drenched plains of Mesopotamia to the shadowed mountains of Anatolia, and perhaps even reaching into the forests of ancient Europe. Yet no single origin story can capture the full terror and allure of this secretive sect. What is certain is that the cult emerged during times of upheaval, when the familiar structures of society were cracking, and the human mind, desperate for meaning, turned to the forbidden. In these moments of uncertainty, the Black Sun offered answers that were as dark as they were seductive, a promise of transcendence through fear, death, and devotion to the unseen. The cult's mythology was as enigmatic as it was terrifying. Unlike mainstream religious systems that celebrated creation, life, or community, the Black Sun offered a mirror to humanity's hidden obsessions. It did not promise comfort. It demanded confrontation with the shadow side of existence. Initiates were taught that only by embracing darkness, both within themselves and in the world around them, could they glimpse ultimate truth. Its teachings were encoded in symbolism, secret texts, and cryptic rituals that blurred the line between spirituality and terror. Every action, every word, every ceremonial gesture carried layers of meaning, meant to twist perception and awaken a mixture of awe and dread. Historians have found tantalizing fragments of evidence, scratched symbols on cave walls, cryptic inscriptions on pottery, and the remnants of sanctuaries hidden from view. Some of these ruins suggest that the cult's followers were obsessed with celestial phenomena, particularly eclipses and the movements of the sun and moon. They may have seen in these events a cosmic reflection of their own dualistic worldview, light and darkness, creation and destruction, life and death. In their eyes, the Black Sun was not merely a symbol but a living force, one that demanded recognition and reverence. Observing the heavens became a spiritual act, an initiation into knowledge reserved only for the devoted, and the consequences of failure or disobedience were unimaginably severe. What drew individuals to the Black Sun was not only fear but also fascination. Ordinary men and women, often trapped in lives of labor, hardship, or political turmoil, were seduced by the cult's promise of empowerment. Unlike the public rituals of state religion, which emphasized obedience and conformity, The black sun offered forbidden power, knowledge, ritual authority, and even a glimpse of immortality. Yet this power came with a price: moral compromise, psychological manipulation, and, eventually, acts that crossed the boundaries of ordinary humanity. By surrendering to the cult, followers were not merely committing themselves to a belief system. They were stepping into a world where terror was intertwined with devotion, where beauty and cruelty coexisted in deliberate balance. The cult's rise cannot be understood without examining the societal fractures that made it possible. In many regions, the ancient world was a landscape of political intrigue, religious upheaval, and economic instability. Kings and governors wielded power with a tenuous grasp, while peasants and artisans lived under constant threat of famine, disease, and conquest. Into this chaos stepped the black sun, offering structure and meaning, but at the cost of participation in acts that defied conventional morality. In this way, the cult was both a product and a manipulator of its environment. It fed on fear, exploited ambition, and in turn reshaped the social and psychological landscape around it. The psychological allure of the Black Sun cult was profound. Initiates were often lured by curiosity and ambition, yet they quickly found themselves ensnared in a web of rituals, oaths, and secret knowledge that reinforced obedience. Each ceremony, no matter how small, was designed to destabilize the mind and reconstruct it in the cult's image. Music, dance, hallucinogenic substances, and intricate symbolism were employed to dissolve fear and instill awe. Over time, the initiates' perception of reality would shift, aligning their sense of morality, loyalty, and even identity with the cult's shadowy teachings. The most terrifying aspect was that these transformations were not imposed by force alone. They were psychologically seductive, making the participant complicit in their own moral and spiritual unraveling. Even the leadership of the Black Sun was a study in psychological mastery. The cult's high priests and priestesses were not mere administrators of ritual. They were orchestrators of perception, capable of manipulating fear, desire, and belief with astonishing precision. They carefully curated experiences to test loyalty, provoke ecstasy, and enforce obedience. Their understanding of human psychology was matched only by their willingness to exploit it fully. Those who faltered, whether through hesitation or doubt, were not merely punished. They were used as instruments of terror, reinforcing the power of the cult in the eyes of others. In this way, every act, every ceremony, and every punishment served both practical and symbolic purposes, cementing the Black Sun's dominion over mind and spirit. In essence, the origins of the Black Sun cult reflect the eternal human tension between curiosity and fear, light and shadow, life and death. Its beginnings were forged in times of instability and psychological vulnerability, and its doctrines were designed to exploit these conditions with chilling efficiency. Yet for all its terror, the cult also captivated the imagination of its followers, offering forbidden truths, transcendent experiences, and a sense of cosmic significance unavailable in ordinary life. In the shadows of history, this paradox, fascination intertwined with horror, became the defining feature of the Black Sun, leaving behind a legacy that continues to unsettle and intrigue to this day. The rituals of the Black Sun cult were unlike anything known to the ordinary world. Hidden in remote valleys, underground sanctuaries, and shadowed forests, these ceremonies combined awe, terror, and meticulous psychological control into experiences that transformed those who participated. Outsiders could never fully understand what took place behind the cult's veiled doors, and even within the inner circle, few emerged untouched. Every ritual was a carefully choreographed dance of light and shadow, sound and silence, devotion and dread. What might seem grotesque or chaotic to the uninitiated was, in fact, a highly refined system of spiritual and psychological manipulation. The ceremonies often began at the hour when the sun was at its lowest, or during celestial events such as eclipses, when the Black Sun's symbolic power was believed to be strongest. In these moments, the natural world itself seemed to mirror the cult's worldview, the ordinary rhythms of day and night disrupted, replaced by a sense of cosmic instability. Initiates were led through corridors of torchlight, their shadows flickering across stone walls carved with symbols too ancient and cryptic for ordinary comprehension. Incense filled the air, thick and suffocating, blurring the boundaries of perception and reality. The effect was disorienting by design. Fear and fascination intertwined, compelling participants to surrender to forces they did not fully understand. Masked figures, often clad in black robes embroidered with golden sigils, performed the rites with ritualized precision. Every gesture, from the raising of hands to the placing of objects upon altars, was imbued with layers of symbolic meaning. These gestures served multiple purposes: to honor the Black Sun, to reinforce the hierarchy of the cult, and to psychologically entrap the initiates in the rhythm of the ritual itself. Music, haunting, droning chants punctuated by the occasional clang of bells or percussion, filled the air, inducing trance-like states in those present. The sensory overload of sound, light, and scent broke down ordinary consciousness, preparing participants to accept the cult's worldview without question. Hallucinogenic substances were often incorporated into these ceremonies. Extracts from rare plants, mysterious powders, and fermented concoctions were administered in measured doses to heighten perception and destabilize rational thought. Under their influence, the world seemed to shimmer and shift. Shadows became alive, flames danced unnaturally, and the chanting of the priests echoed as if from some other dimension. In these altered states, participants reported visions of the black sun itself, a pulsating, radiant, yet terrifying force both life-giving and destructive. Such experiences were not mere hallucinations. They were carefully engineered to produce awe, reverence, and unquestioning loyalty. Blood, too, played a central role in the cult ceremonies. In some rituals, initiates made small, symbolic cuts upon themselves, offering their own lifeblood as an act of devotion. In more extreme ceremonies, animals were sacrificed in highly controlled displays, their deaths choreographed to convey cosmic balance and power. The symbolic resonance of blood was immense. It represented life, death, loyalty, and the intimate connection between the mortal and the divine. For the initiates, witnessing or participating in these acts created a visceral bond with the cult, reinforcing the idea that their loyalty demanded not just belief, but participation in acts that transcended conventional morality. Perhaps most haunting was the cult's use of contrast and duality within the rituals. Light and darkness were manipulated deliberately, torches and braziers cast fleeting, trembling illuminations, leaving half the sanctuary in shadows. Silence was punctuated by sudden noises, a bell, a shout, the crash of metal, jolting participants out of any sense of security. The result was a heightened sensitivity to the ritual's symbolic power, and a psychological dependence on the cult structure for understanding the world. Initiates were taught that the ordinary world, bathed in sunlight and familiar order, was an illusion. Only by surrendering to the darkness of the black sun could true vision be attained. The psychological mastery extended beyond the sensory to the social. Rituals reinforced hierarchy, loyalty, and obedience. New initiates were closely observed by high-ranking members, who could reward or punish with subtle gestures, expressions, or whispered commands. The threat of exclusion, disgrace, or even death ensured compliance, while moments of approval and inclusion created deep emotional bonds. Participants learned to equate the cult's approval with survival and meaning itself. In this way, the ceremonies were more than spiritual or mystical events. They were laboratories of human psychology, designed to bend will, deepen devotion, and erase personal identity. Despite the terror, the rituals often possessed a dark, hypnotic beauty. Cloaked figures moving in perfect synchronization, the flickering patterns of firelight on ancient stone, and the haunting melodies of the chants created an aesthetic that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. This deliberate intertwining of beauty and horror ensured that participants were emotionally overwhelmed, unable to process the experience rationally. By combining fascination with fear, the cult created an environment in which the most extreme acts, even those that would horrify the uninitiated, could be internalized as sacred. Accounts, both historical and anecdotal, hint at the long-lasting effects these rituals had on participants. Some described visions of cosmic knowledge, mystical insights into life and death, or overwhelming feelings of unity with the black sun itself. Others reported lingering trauma, anxiety, and an obsession with secrecy that persisted long after they left the sanctuary. In every case, the rituals succeeded in their ultimate goal, to bind the initiate to the cult, body, mind, and soul, ensuring loyalty that was both fervent and psychologically unshakable. In the end, the Black Sun ceremonies were far more than religious observance. They were immersive experiences of terror and ecstasy, designed to break down the ordinary human mind and reconstruct it according to the cult's philosophy. Every chant, every flame, every symbolic act served to entangle the senses, the emotions, and the psyche, leaving participants transformed. In the hidden corners of the ancient world, these rituals were the crucible through which ordinary men and women were made into devotees, and through which the Black Sun itself, a symbol of death, power, and forbidden knowledge, continued to cast its shadow across human history. Initiation into the Black Sun cult was not merely a ceremony, it was a passage into a world where the familiar rules of morality, identity, and fear no longer applied. For outsiders, the process seemed cruel, incomprehensible, even insane. But to the cult, It was a transformative journey, a ritualized stripping away of the ordinary self to be reborn in the shadow of the Black Sun. Each new member faced trials designed to dismantle their sense of safety, identity, and autonomy, replacing them with loyalty, fear, and a profound reverence for the dark forces they now served. The initiation began long before the ceremony itself. Prospective members were observed, tested, and psychologically probed for months, if not years. Cult leaders sought out individuals who were ambitious, curious, or otherwise vulnerable. Those who could be manipulated with a combination of fear, fascination, and the promise of forbidden knowledge. These candidates were drawn into subtle rituals and secret gatherings, where obedience and discretion were gradually reinforced. Even small acts, a whispered command obeyed, a secret kept, a taboo explored, became milestones, conditioning the mind to accept the extraordinary as normal. When the formal initiation arrived, the candidate was often blindfolded and led into the sanctum, a hidden chamber suffused with flickering torchlight, the scent of incense, and the weight of anticipation. The air itself seemed to pulse with the cult's presence. Here, ordinary laws of behavior and expectation were suspended. The initiate was subjected to extreme sensory experiences. Sudden bursts of sound, blinding light, shadowy figures moving with unnatural precision. Every element was calculated to disorient and destabilize the mind. The goal was not cruelty for its own sake, but the creation of a psychological state in which the ordinary world no longer existed and the only reality was the cult itself. Blood played a central role in the initiation. In some ceremonies, the initiate made small, deliberate cuts upon their own body, symbolizing the sacrifice of their former self. In others, they were required to witness or participate in the sacrifice of animals, each act carrying layers of symbolic meaning. Life for life, devotion for power, fear for understanding. The ritual was designed to force the initiate to confront mortality and submission in a visceral, unambiguous way. By placing themselves in direct contact with pain, blood, and death, participants internalized the cult's philosophy, that the Black Sun's truth could only be grasped through personal cost and surrender. The initiation also tested loyalty and psychological resilience. Candidates were confronted with moral dilemmas, extreme sensations, and carefully orchestrated terror. They might be left alone in pitch-dark chambers, forced to navigate hallways lined with unsettling symbols, or made to perform acts that challenged their ethical understanding. Each challenge was a deliberate attempt to separate those capable of true devotion from those who could not withstand the weight of shadowed knowledge. Failure was rarely met with mercy, at best, a brutal lesson in obedience, and at worst, permanent exclusion or ritualized punishment. Yet within this extremity there was also reward and transcendence. Initiates who succeeded emerged not only accepted but elevated, having endured a crucible that few could survive. They gained access to secret teachings, mystical insights, and positions of influence within the cult. The sense of power, knowledge, and belonging that accompanied initiation was intoxicating. Ordinary fear and hesitation were replaced with a deep, sometimes overwhelming devotion. The cult's rituals ensured that once a person entered fully into the Black Sun's world, they rarely returned to their previous life unchanged. The psychological impact of initiation cannot be overstated. By orchestrating fear, awe, and ecstasy, the cult effectively rewired participants' perceptions of morality, loyalty, and reality. Members came to associate the cult's approval with safety, meaning, and even identity itself. The process blurred the line between personal desire and imposed obedience, making the individual complicit in their own transformation. In this way, the Black Sun created a self-reinforcing cycle. The more one submitted, the more one was rewarded with knowledge and power, deepening the psychological bond and ensuring long-term loyalty. In the broader context of the ancient world, initiation into the Black Sun was a radical act. It demanded the surrender of personal freedom, the embrace of terror, and the willingness to commit acts that defied ordinary morality. Yet for many, the allure of hidden knowledge, forbidden power, and mystical insight outweighed the cost. By stepping into the darkness willingly, initiates became not only followers but instruments of the cult, carrying its influence into wider society. They became living embodiments of its philosophy, proof of the seductive and destructive power of the Black Sun. Ultimately, the initiation rites were more than tests or ceremonies. They were crucibles of transformation, designed to destroy and rebuild the self according to the cult's vision. By enduring the physical, emotional, and moral challenges imposed upon them, new members emerged altered, bound irrevocably to the Black Sun. Their identities, once independent, were now intertwined with shadow and ritual, devotion and fear. In this way, the cult ensured its survival, not through coercion alone, but through the creation of followers who were psychologically inseparable from its dark, enigmatic doctrine. The mythology of the Black Sun was not a simple collection of stories. It was a deliberate, intricate system designed to captivate, terrify, and indoctrinate. Unlike the deities of mainstream religions, which often embodied mercy, justice, or fertility, the Black Sun represented paradox itself, a cosmic force of creation intertwined with destruction, light fused inseparably with shadow. Followers were taught that the ordinary world, bathed in sunlight and structured by familiar moral codes, was only a shallow reflection of a deeper, hidden reality. To gaze upon the Black Sun was to confront the raw, unmediated forces of the universe, a confrontation that demanded both reverence and submission. Central to the cult's belief system was the idea of duality. Life and death, beauty and horror, love and cruelty, all were aspects of a single unified cosmic order. The Black Sun itself was a symbol of this duality, radiating light and warmth while simultaneously casting the longest, coldest shadows. Initiates were taught to embrace this contradiction, to see in every act of cruelty a hidden lesson, and in every act of devotion a measure of power. The mythology was not merely symbolic, it was functional, a psychological framework designed to justify actions that would horrify outsiders while binding followers ever closer to the cult. The cosmology of the Black Sun was vividly portrayed through elaborate storytelling, ceremonies, and symbolic art. Murals, carved reliefs, and sacred texts depicted the Black Sun as both a source of illumination and an agent of destruction. In some representations, the sun itself was fractured, bleeding darkness across the heavens, a celestial mirror to the moral and spiritual upheavals of the human world. These images were not passive, they were active instruments of indoctrination. Initiates who studied them were encouraged to meditate upon their meaning, often under the guidance of high priests who revealed layers of interpretation designed to manipulate perception and reinforce devotion. The cult's myths also contained elements of personal transformation. Followers were taught that the path to true knowledge and power required confronting one's own inner darkness. Fear, desire, envy, and cruelty were not to be denied or suppressed but understood, harnessed, and offered as tribute to the Black Sun. Initiates were encouraged to explore the boundaries of morality and social convention, to witness and participate in acts that would sever ties to ordinary human restraint. By internalizing these lessons, they were made complicit in the cult's philosophy, their minds reshaped to align with the shadowed logic of the Black Sun itself. Ceremonial reenactments of the mythology were common. In these rites, participants would act out cosmic battles between light and shadow, life and death, order and chaos. The drama was not merely theatrical, it was immersive, designed to elicit profound emotional responses and forge a deep psychological bond with the cult. Those who participated experienced a sense of both terror and transcendence, as if they were simultaneously witnessing and embodying the universe's most fundamental forces. Through repeated exposure, the myths became lived experience, dissolving the line between story and reality, symbol and action. Another key element of the mythology was the idea of ascension through knowledge. The Black Sun was not simply a deity or celestial object. It was a teacher, a force that demanded understanding through direct experience. Followers were told that comprehension of its mysteries could grant extraordinary insight into life, death, and the hidden currents that governed existence. But this knowledge came with a price. To truly understand the Black Sun, one had to embrace acts and experiences that challenged moral instincts, tested courage, and sometimes demanded the ultimate sacrifice. In this way, the mythology served both as inspiration and as a mechanism of control, ensuring that only the most devoted, fearless, and psychologically pliable could advance within the cult. The cult also used mythology to create moral and cosmic justification for extreme acts. Sacrifices, rites of initiation, and the enforcement of loyalty were framed not as cruelty, but as essential rituals in the balance of the universe. Each act was presented as a reflection of the Black Sun's cosmic order, an echo of its paradoxical power. Followers were encouraged to see terror as sacred, obedience as liberation, and participation in darkness as a path to enlightenment. This narrative structure provided the psychological scaffolding for acts that, without such framing, would have been inconceivable. The stories themselves were often intentionally ambiguous, designed to provoke reflection, fear, and obsession. Texts described battles between shadow and light with no clear winner, moral lessons that contradicted one another, and cosmological events that defied comprehension. By keeping meaning elusive, the cult maintained an atmosphere of mystery and dependency. Initiates had to continually return to the texts, the high priests, and the rituals to parse truth from symbol, cementing their loyalty and deepening their entanglement in the cult's worldview. Perhaps most chilling was the way the mythology internalized moral corruption. The Black Sun demanded that followers confront their darkest impulses not in secret, but as sacred acts, often performed publicly within ceremonies. Through this lens, fear, cruelty, and even violence were transformed into spiritual currency, a means of proving devotion and gaining knowledge. The psychological effect was profound. By framing moral transgression as cosmic duty, the cult ensured that members not only accepted but actively participated in acts that reinforced the power and sanctity of the Black Sun. Ultimately, the mythology of the Black Sun was more than a system of belief. It was the backbone of a psychological empire. It created a universe in which fear, power, and obedience were intertwined with enlightenment, mystery, and cosmic significance. By embedding duality, moral complexity, and psychological manipulation into every story, image, and ritual, the cult ensured that its followers were both terrified and captivated, willing to surrender mind and soul to its shadowed authority. In this way, the Black Sun's mythos was not merely told, it was lived, enacted, and internalized, leaving an indelible imprint on those who encountered it and a legacy of fascination, horror, and forbidden curiosity that endures across centuries. The Black Sun cult did not confine itself to secluded sanctuaries and shadowed forests. Its influence extended far beyond ritual chambers, weaving into the very fabric of ancient political life. Kings, governors, and military leaders who might have dismissed mere superstition were often ensnared by the cult's subtle and insidious strategies. In a world where power was fragile and authority constantly contested, the cult offered rulers not only secret knowledge but also promises of control, protection, and divine favor. To those who understood the Black Sun's manipulative genius, participation in or alignment with the cult became a tool to consolidate power, manipulate rivals, and influence the destinies of entire cities and kingdoms. The cult's entanglement with politics was a blend of persuasion, intimidation, and ritualized spectacle. Some rulers were quietly approached by high-ranking cult members, who offered insight into omens, celestial events, and secret wisdom that seemed to grant advantage over rivals. Others were drawn into more public, ceremonial displays, where participation in Black Sun rituals was framed as a sacred duty with cosmic significance. These acts were designed to blur the line between personal authority and divine mandate, convincing rulers and their courts that power itself flowed from obedience to the cult's shadowed principles. But coercion was as important as seduction. The Black Sun's leaders understood the human psyche, exploiting fear as masterfully as they leveraged ambition. Whispers of curses, threats of exposure, or hints of violence toward family and subjects could bend even the most resolute monarchs to compliance. In some cases, rulers were compelled to sanction sacrifices, enforce secret laws, or eliminate rivals, all under the guise of loyalty to higher cosmic truths. Through this combination of fascination and dread, the cult embedded itself within political hierarchies, ensuring that its influence radiated outward like the hidden shadow of a great sun. Historians suggest that some of the most significant conflicts of the ancient world may have been influenced, at least in part, by the Black Sun's secret hand. Assassinations, unexplained purges, and the sudden fall of powerful leaders were sometimes attributed to divine wrath, political intrigue, or fate. In reality, the cult's manipulation of fear, knowledge, and ritual authority may have been the true catalyst. By aligning themselves with rulers or destabilizing regimes covertly, cult members wielded a level of power disproportionate to their numbers, shaping the course of history while remaining hidden in plain sight. The rituals that intersected with political life were designed to awe, terrify, and solidify loyalty. Court officials and nobles who participated were immersed in sensory experiences that mirrored those of the inner sanctum. Flickering torchlight, chanting, incense, and ceremonial gestures that conveyed cosmic order. Every detail, from the timing of movements to the symbolic placement of artifacts, reinforced the notion that authority, morality, and survival were inseparable from obedience to the Black Sun. Those who resisted or faltered were made examples of, their failures dramatized to reinforce the cult's psychological grip on observers and participants alike. Even in regions where rulers did not directly participate, the cult exerted influence through advisors, generals, and emissaries. These intermediaries acted as conduits, delivering knowledge, enforcing oaths, and orchestrating events that advanced the cult's objectives. They blurred the line between religion, politics, and espionage, ensuring that the cult's reach extended far beyond the hidden chambers of initiation. Ordinary citizens, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the full extent of the cult's manipulations, perceiving only fragmented events, mysterious deaths, or sudden policy changes, attributing them to divine will or chance rather than the deliberate hand of the Black Sun. The psychological sophistication of the cult's political strategies cannot be overstated. By exploiting ambition, fear, and the human desire for cosmic significance, the Black Sun ensured that rulers and their courts became both participants and instruments of its philosophy. Every decision made in alignment with the cult's guidance reinforced the perception of its power, creating a self-reinforcing cycle in which obedience and awe became inseparable. Over time, this influence transformed ordinary political acts into extensions of the cult's shadowed will, subtly steering entire civilizations according to principles of secrecy, terror, and devotion to the Black Sun. One of the most chilling aspects of the cult's political entanglement was its subtlety. Unlike overt conquerors or tyrants, the Black Sun rarely sought direct control. Instead, it thrived in manipulation, in the quiet reshaping of perception and allegiance. Kings might believe themselves to be the architects of strategy, advisors the masters of diplomacy, yet each action was often guided or inspired by unseen forces within the cult. By remaining in the shadows, the Black Sun achieved a level of influence that was virtually untraceable. Its power derived as much from mystery as from tangible acts. Through this interplay of fear, ambition, and ceremonial awe, the Black Sun extended its dominion from secret sanctuaries to palaces and courts, influencing decisions that shaped the destinies of empires. The cult became a masterclass in psychological strategy, demonstrating that true power need not rely on armies or wealth alone, but on manipulation of perception, control of knowledge, and the ability to instill both terror and reverence in the hearts of men. In this way, the cult's reach became nearly limitless, a shadowed empire of influence that shaped history while remaining invisible to the casual observer. Ultimately, the political entanglements of the Black Sun reveal a central truth about its nature. It was not merely a religious or mystical phenomenon. It was a psychological force, a system of control, and a network of influence that harnessed human ambition, fear, and desire to extend its shadow across the ancient world. By infiltrating the highest levels of power, the cult ensured that its philosophy, rituals, and terror were not confined to the inner sanctum but radiated outward, leaving an indelible mark on history itself. It was in these shadowed intersections of politics and mysticism that the true genius and danger of the Black Sun became undeniable, demonstrating how fear, devotion, and secrecy could reshape civilizations in ways both subtle and profound. At the heart of the Black Sun cult's terror lay its most horrifying practice: human sacrifice. While outsiders may have imagined these rituals as crude or chaotic, they were, in fact, highly calculated events, designed to both instill awe and reinforce the cult's psychological dominion. Sacrifice was not simply an act of violence. It was a meticulously structured intersection of belief, fear, and cosmic symbolism. To the initiates and priests, it represented the ultimate proof of devotion, the highest form of communication with the Black Sun, and a tangible expression of the duality that defined their worldview: life given to affirm death, darkness embraced to honor illumination. The process often began long before the act itself. Victims, whether chosen from within the cult or captured from the outside, were prepared in secret. In some cases, they were treated with a surreal combination of reverence and terror, clothed in ceremonial garments, bathed in ritual oils, or adorned with symbols representing their passage from the mortal realm to the shadowed dominion of the Black Sun. The psychological preparation was as critical as the physical. Fear was cultivated, obedience encouraged, and awe instilled. Those who participated in or observed the ceremony were drawn into a complex emotional web, where horror and fascination became indistinguishable. The location of the sacrifice was chosen with extreme care. Hidden caves, forest clearings, and underground chambers amplified the ceremonial gravity, their architecture and natural acoustics designed to intensify sensory perception. Torches cast flickering, trembling shadows that transformed simple stone or earth into a stage of cosmic significance. Chanting, drums, and other ritual sounds created a rhythm that synchronized the participants' emotions, guiding them through fear, anticipation, and ecstatic devotion. Every detail of the environment was orchestrated to immerse all present in the cult's worldview, making them complicit in the act through psychological as much as physical presence. Blood, both symbolic and literal, was central to the ritual. Some ceremonies involved only small amounts, a drop or two to sanctify the altar and demonstrate personal sacrifice. Others were far more extreme, involving animals or human victims whose lifeblood was offered to the Black Sun. The act of shedding blood was framed as a cosmic necessity, a way to maintain balance between light and shadow, life and death. For the cult, blood was not merely biological, it was sacred, a medium through which devotion was measured and cosmic forces appeased. To witness or partake in this act was to step beyond ordinary morality, to accept the premise that horror itself could be holy. The psychological impact of witnessing human sacrifice was profound. Initiates and observers were forced to confront mortality, fear, and their own complicity. The rituals were designed to create a sense of awe and terror simultaneously, blurring the boundaries between observer and participant. This duality was deliberate. Those who understood the underlying cosmic symbolism were elevated, while those who hesitated or resisted became cautionary examples. Through repetition, these ceremonies normalized acts of extreme violence within the cult's moral framework, embedding obedience, fear, and devotion into the consciousness of all involved. In some historical accounts, victims were chosen for their symbolic significance. Children, young adults, or individuals representing specific social classes or familial lineages were sometimes offered to the Black Sun to reinforce the cult's connection to life cycles, cosmic events, or political influence. Each sacrifice carried layers of meaning, transforming what might appear to outsiders as senseless brutality into a carefully orchestrated act of ritualized terror and symbolic resonance. The selection and preparation of victims demonstrated the cult's meticulous attention to the intersection of psychology, mythology, and power. The method of sacrifice itself varied depending on the ritual's intended effect. Some acts were swift and precise, meant to demonstrate mastery over life and death, while others were prolonged and ceremonial, designed to heighten fear, devotion, and emotional intensity. In all cases, the experience was both a communal and a cosmic event. Participants shared in the act of devotion, while priests and leaders framed it as communication with the Black Sun, an offering that transcended the mortal plane. In this way, human life became a conduit for spiritual and psychological transformation, a grim yet compelling proof of the cult's power. Sacrificial ceremonies also served a political function. When rulers or influential figures were present, the acts reinforced authority and control, demonstrating the cult's ability to manipulate fear and devotion simultaneously. Participants, even those of high rank, were reminded that the Black Sun's power extended beyond the mortal realm, that its influence could bend morality, loyalty, and survival. In some instances, historical records suggest that the cult leveraged these ceremonies to influence political outcomes, using terror as a tool of persuasion, control, and subtle coercion. Perhaps most chilling of all was the cult's ability to make moral transgression sacred. Followers were trained to perceive acts of cruelty, violence, and fear not as evil but as sacred duties, essential to maintaining cosmic balance and personal enlightenment. This moral inversion ensured that the participants internalized the cult's worldview completely. Obedience and horror became indistinguishable from devotion and understanding. The psychological grip was absolute, leaving initiates and observers alike bound to the cult's philosophy in ways that would persist for a lifetime. The long-term effects of these sacrificial rituals were profound. Survivors often emerged transformed, with a heightened sense of loyalty, fear, and cosmic awareness. They internalized the cult's teachings, associating terror with sacred purpose and obedience with enlightenment. Even those who only witnessed the rituals were psychologically altered, their perception of morality, loyalty, and the natural world reshaped by direct exposure to the Black Sun's philosophy. In this way, human sacrifice was not merely an isolated act of brutality but a carefully engineered instrument of psychological control, spiritual indoctrination, and societal influence. In the end, the human sacrifices of the Black Sun cult were emblematic of its larger purpose: to create a universe in which fear, devotion, and cosmic symbolism were inseparable. Each act of bloodshed was both an offering and a lesson, a brutal but deeply effective method of teaching the initiate, manipulating the powerful, and reinforcing the cult's mystical and psychological dominion. It was a terror designed not only to shock but to bind the mind and soul, a chilling testament to the lengths humanity will go to pursue forbidden knowledge, ultimate power, and the seductive promise of transcendence through darkness. As centuries passed, the Black Sun cult's presence evolved from hidden sanctuaries and secretive forests into an enduring influence that subtly infiltrated the wider world. What had begun as clandestine rituals and isolated ceremonies transformed into a pervasive psychological and cultural force. No longer confined to initiates or priests, the ideology of the Black Sun seeped into politics, society, and collective consciousness, leaving marks that would outlive the cult itself. Fear, reverence, and fascination became inseparably intertwined, creating a worldview in which cruelty was sanctified, terror became devotion, and obedience equated to enlightenment. The cult's rituals, once focused solely on indoctrination and initiation, gradually became elaborate performances designed to reinforce psychological dominance. Initiates were subjected to ceremonies blending terror and ecstasy, where the line between life and death, light and shadow, morality and transgression, blurred into a singular, overwhelming experience. Some describe these ceremonies as almost hallucinatory, with flickering torches casting impossible shadows across ritual chambers, the sound of drums echoing like a heartbeat across the walls, and incense so potent that it seemed to warp perception itself. Participants were thrust into an emotional crucible, confronting fear, desire, and awe simultaneously, in ways that reshaped their understanding of morality, loyalty, and the cosmos. The psychological strategies employed by the cult had become sophisticated beyond mere indoctrination. Fear alone was insufficient. Devotion required fascination, beauty, and moral ambiguity. Music, chanting, hypnotic gestures, and symbolic choreography overwhelmed the senses, drawing initiates into states of heightened suggestibility. Each element of the ritual was meticulously calculated to manipulate emotion and cognition. By the time a ceremony concluded, participants had internalized the cult's principles. Horror equated to sacredness, moral transgression became a form of spiritual obedience, and fear was a conduit to cosmic understanding. In its later stages, the Black Sun cult increasingly entangled itself with political and societal structures. Kings, generals, and influential advisors were not mere observers but active participants, drawn into the cult through subtle coercion, persuasion, or the seductive promise of hidden power. Public displays of ritualized fear and devotion served multiple purposes. They reinforced the cult's authority, demonstrated its control over human behavior, and intimidated rivals or dissenters. The psychological impact of witnessing such spectacles was immense. Ordinary citizens, even when only partially aware of the event's significance, internalized the cult's dominance through a combination of awe, terror, and subtle suggestion. Even within the sanctum, cruelty and ritualized horror reached new heights. Initiates endured extreme trials of fear, endurance, and moral inversion, not only to prove loyalty but to demonstrate mastery over their own humanity. Those who faltered faced punishment designed to reinforce obedience and submission, while survivors were elevated, celebrated as exemplars of the cult's philosophy. Here, cruelty became sacred, moral inversion became a tool of devotion, and terror transformed into a psychological instrument of both enlightenment and control. The cult had perfected the art of turning fear into a sacred experience, leaving indelible marks on the minds of those who passed through its ceremonies. The moral inversion propagated by the cult was not limited to ritual. Daily life for members was suffused with constant reinforcement of Black Sun principles. Symbols etched into private spaces, whispered chants at specific times, coded texts, and ritualistic behaviors embedded in ordinary activities ensured that the philosophy of the Black Sun was omnipresent. Followers were trained to perceive acts normally condemned by society, cruelty, deception, manipulation, as morally justified and spiritually necessary. This continuous psychological conditioning blurred the line between obedience, belief, and morality, ensuring that the cult's influence extended beyond the ritual chamber into every aspect of life. Political influence also became a central element of the cult's expansion. The Black Sun's leaders understood the human desire for power, legitimacy, and cosmic favor. By subtly guiding rulers, officials, and military commanders, the cult reshaped decisions and outcomes, manipulating fear, loyalty, and ambition to achieve objectives without overt confrontation. Historical accounts hint that sudden purges, unexpected betrayals, and mysterious deaths may have been influenced by the cult's strategies. In this sense, the Black Sun became a shadow power, demonstrating that ideology, psychological control, and ritualized manipulation could rival armies and empires in shaping the course of history. As its power solidified, the cult perfected the integration of terror and awe into every facet of existence. Public ceremonies, secret rites, and personal indoctrination created a psychological environment in which devotion, fear, and moral inversion were inseparable. Individuals were compelled to internalize the cult's worldview, that the embrace of darkness was a path to enlightenment, that cruelty and fear could be sacred, and that obedience to cosmic authority was both necessary and inevitable. This immersive system ensured the longevity of the Black Sun's influence, allowing its philosophy to outlive physical structures, priests, and empires. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Black Sun's later evolution was the normalization of horror. Acts that would shock or horrify outsiders, ritualized cruelty, psychological manipulation, and moral transgression, were reframed as sacred acts of devotion. The repeated exposure to fear and horror rewired perception, transforming terror into reverence and moral inversion into spiritual progress. The psychological grip on initiates, leaders and observers became absolute, creating a society in miniature where fear, obedience and awe were indistinguishable from holiness. The cult had turned human nature itself into a tool, shaping morality, devotion and perception through terror and spectacle. The cultural legacy of the Black Sun also intensified during this period. Its myths, symbols and ceremonies began to permeate art, folklore and philosophy. Representations of fractured suns, dualities, shadowed temples and cosmic cycles appear in manuscripts, alchemical texts, and secret societies long after the cult's decline. The stories and symbols associated with the Black Sun became embedded in the collective imagination, influencing generations of writers, thinkers and occult practitioners. Its psychological blueprint, blending fear, fascination and moral ambiguity, became a template for exploring the human capacity for obsession, terror and devotion. In essence, the later stage of the Black Sun cult represents a culmination of its philosophy. Terror, cruelty and obedience had become both instrument and end. Initiates were no longer merely followers. They had become living embodiments of the cult's principles, walking reflections of its psychological mastery. Fear became a pathway to understanding, moral transgression a form of devotion, and obedience a measure of enlightenment. This evolution demonstrated a profound understanding of human psychology, one that manipulated the most fundamental aspects of perception, emotion and belief to achieve extraordinary and enduring control. Ultimately, the later Black Sun reveals a chilling truth about human nature. When terror, obsession and reverence are intertwined, morality becomes malleable, perception can be reshaped, and devotion can be engineered through fear. The cult's enduring influence underscores the delicate balance between awe and horror, devotion and cruelty, fascination and fear. Its philosophy, rituals and psychological strategies left marks that survive beyond the physical remnants of the cult, shaping human thought, society and imagination in ways both subtle and profound. In this period, the Black Sun's shadow became indistinguishable from the world itself. Its teachings and influence permeated human behavior, inspiring both fear and fascination. Even in the absence of centralized leadership, the cult's principles endured, transmitted through symbols, myths and cultural memory. Its psychological architecture, combining awe, terror and moral inversion, became a lens through which humans interpreted power, morality and the cosmos, leaving an indelible mark on both individual minds and broader societies. The final lesson of this stage is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The Black Sun demonstrates how human belief, fear and fascination can be manipulated to extraordinary effect. By sanctifying horror, embedding psychological control into ritual, and intertwining devotion with moral inversion, the cult achieved a mastery over perception, loyalty, and thought that transcended ordinary understanding. It became a living testament to the power of fear and awe, revealing the extent to which human consciousness can be guided, shaped, and transformed by ideology, ritual, and psychological mastery. The shadow of the Black Sun did not fade with the collapse of its temples, the silencing of its priests, or the end of the empires that once bowed, subtly or unknowingly, to its influence. Its presence lingered, not in open ceremonies or political decrees, but in whispers, legends, and the deep psychological imprints left on those who had once encountered its dark, seductive power. Across the ancient world, the cult became both a secret and a myth, a paradoxical force whose memory was preserved not in formal records alone but in fear, awe, and the stories passed from one generation to the next. Its impact on human imagination would outlive its tangible institutions, leaving a shadow that stretched far beyond the bounds of time and geography. In considering the legacy of the Black Sun, one must first confront the cult's profound psychological influence. Unlike ordinary religious or political organizations, the Black Sun did not merely command obedience. It reshaped the minds of its followers, molding perception, morality, and identity in ways that were both subtle and absolute. Through years of ritual, initiation, and psychological conditioning, members were trained to associate fear with devotion, cruelty with sacred purpose, and obedience with enlightenment. This psychological architecture ensured that the cult's influence persisted long after individuals physically left its sanctuaries, a haunting, permanent presence within their consciousness. The cult's impact on the human fascination with the forbidden cannot be overstated. Across centuries, societies have been drawn to the allure of secret knowledge, hidden rituals, and forbidden wisdom, a cultural echo of the Black Sun's original seduction. Stories of shadowed temples, cosmic rituals, and sacrifices inspired generations of mythmakers, storytellers, and later, writers and philosophers. Even when the cult itself vanished, its symbolic resonance endured, influencing occult practices, secret societies, and literary explorations of human darkness. In this sense, the Black Sun did not merely exist as a historical entity. It became a psychological and cultural archetype, an enduring symbol of the danger and allure of forbidden knowledge. The moral inversion propagated by the cult offers another critical aspect of its legacy. By framing acts of cruelty, manipulation, and moral transgression as sacred and necessary, the Black Sun challenged the very foundation of ethical reasoning. Initiates came to perceive acts that would normally be deemed abhorrent as essential to spiritual progress, understanding, or cosmic balance. This inversion not only ensured loyalty but also demonstrated the fragility of human morality when confronted with prolonged psychological pressure, ritualized fear, and the promise of forbidden insight. Modern psychologists studying cults, totalitarian movements, and the manipulation of belief systems often cite similar patterns. The normalization of transgression as a path to perceived transcendence, echoing strategies the Black Sun perfected millennia ago. The cult's reach extended far beyond personal psychology into political and societal influence. Kings, generals, and advisors who participated in or were manipulated by the cult acted in accordance with principles shaped by fear, awe, and perceived cosmic authority. Historical accounts suggest that the outcomes of battles, purges, and dynastic shifts may have been indirectly influenced by the subtle orchestration of the Black Sun's leaders. By exploiting ambition, loyalty, and the human desire for cosmic validation, the cult exercised a form of invisible power, altering history without the need for armies or overt political force. In essence, it became a shadow government, an unseen hand guiding events and shaping civilizations from the shadows. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Black Sun's legacy is the normalization of horror. Through ritual, myth, and ceremony, the cult transformed fear, suffering, and cruelty into instruments of devotion and enlightenment. Acts that would terrify ordinary humans were reframed as sacred expressions of cosmic order. The dawn mist curls around the ruined temples of Tenochtitlan, the air thick with the scent of burnt offerings long extinguished. To the Aztecs, cruelty was never chaos, it was order. Pain was not punishment but purification. They lived in a world where the gods demanded suffering, and mercy was the greatest sin. Every wound, every sacrifice, every scream was a prayer in motion, an act that held the fragile balance of existence together. The Tisitol, the shaman exorcist, embodied this belief. When he raised his obsidian knife, he became both healer and executioner. His goal was not to destroy evil but to restore harmony between mortal and divine. The afflicted, bound and trembling, offered their pain as proof of devotion. To outsiders, these exorcisms looked like cruelty, bloodletting, chanting, ritual mutilation. But to the Aztecs, it was faith made visible. Their world was built on the idea that life itself demanded sacrifice. The sun rose because the gods had bled. The crops grew because humans offered their own flesh in return. Mercy in such a world was not kindness, it was betrayal. To refuse pain was to defy the gods and invite destruction. The Aztec heart understood something brutal yet profound. Creation and suffering were the same force wearing different masks. Even their art whispered this truth. The same hands that painted flowers on temple walls also carved skulls from stone. Beauty and cruelty were not opposites, they were inseparable. The sacred flower only bloomed because the earth was fed with blood. To love the world was to feed it, sometimes with one's own life. Spanish chroniclers, horrified by what they saw, called it savagery. Yet they misunderstood. The Aztecs did not worship pain, they worshipped balance. Their rituals were mathematics written in blood, every offering carefully measured to sustain the universe. For them, cruelty was not the opposite of compassion. It was compassion perfected, an act that ensured the world would continue another day. When the Tisitol whispered, "Pain purifies," he was not speaking metaphorically. He meant it. Suffering was transformation, agony was rebirth. His exorcisms were not acts of hatred but of faith. Faith that the gods were listening, that every cut and cry meant something in the great cosmic cycle. This is what made Aztec cruelty sacred. It was not mindless violence, it was devotion sharpened into ritual. And though their empire has fallen, the echo of that faith lingers. It asks a question that still haunts us. If suffering brings meaning, is cruelty always evil? The Aztecs answered with their lives, believing that to hurt, to bleed, to sacrifice, was not to destroy but to sustain the very soul of the world.